How's it going? My name's Eamon. I'm a Slim and World consultant here in a town called East Kilbride, just outside Glasgow. And for a couple of months, I've been wanting to put together some videos and put them up online there, just really to explain a bit more about our groups and a bit more about Slim and World in general. So I was having a little think about it, and the first video I suppose that I thought to come up with was a bit more about myself. People don't necessarily know my backstory and how this boy from Dublin ended up being a Slim and World consultant in Scotland. So that's really what I decided to do. So for anyone that does know me or has ever attended my groups, they'll know obviously I'm from Dublin originally, and I came to Glasgow via Belfast, where I lived for 10 years as well. And when I first moved to Glasgow to live in East Kilbride, I was overweight, but I always had been for most of my life, and all throughout my childhood and my teenage years as well. That was always what I was kind of known as, was the bigger friend, if you like. And when I first got then to Scotland, I was working for the same company I worked for in Belfast, and they allowed me to come over and work from home. And to be quite honest, in those first 3 months of my life where I'd ever lived on my own completely as well, it got me to the point where I was bigger than I'd ever been before in my life. So 3 months in to having moved over to Scotland, I finally approached my cousin, who was a Slim and World consultant. And on my birthday, on my 30th birthday in fact, in June 2014, she invited me over for dinner. So at her house that evening, what I found was I was incredibly uncomfortable. It took me ages to find clothes that would fit me. And even sitting there on her couch while I was waiting for dinner, I was constantly having to move either to the left or to the right. And it was just very uncomfortable. It was warm weather as well. And it was that night that, because she was a consultant, because I'd heard bits and bobs about Slim and World, obviously through her losing loads of weight and becoming a consultant, but also having other family members that had also lost quite a lot of weight. I finally asked her that night, kind of in secret, off to one side, can you help me? And first thing she said to me was, I've been waiting for you to approach me and ask me. And at that point she had she had it all worked out for me. So it was quite a big step at that point for me to actually ask for help, because as a man, as someone who didn't really know the first thing about food, didn't really know the first thing about weight loss, I'd never tried to diet before in my life, it was difficult to turn around and ask for help. And also because it was a Slim and World group, I made that kind of assumption and generalisation that everyone does, that Slim and World groups are for women only, and it wasn't really what I wanted to do to lose the weight, but I was out of ideas and I didn't know where to start, was the bottom line, and I had quite a lot of weight to lose. So, as she said, she'd almost been waiting for me to approach her and ask, but she was waiting for me, as any consultant would do. And when I was asking her all about it and what's involved in it, she said, well, my group's, tomorrow or whatever it was. I think it was a Thursday night group. The area that I lived in East Kilbride, there was a group there, but I'd missed that group for the week. So there was one tomorrow that she done in a different part of East Kilbride, and she said you can come along to that. So immediately my defences kind of went up, and I thought that's a bit too soon. This is me just asking a question. And she said, well, it's there tomorrow. And I said, well, how much is it to join? She said, I've already got a voucher. I've got a magazine sitting there. There's a magazine voucher for free membership this week. So almost without realising it, from opening my mouth and finally asking the question, within 10 minutes, that's it. I was going. And I always try and say it was against my will a little bit, but it wasn't. I wanted to lose weight. I just wasn't really too sure what was involved in it. So I went along to group the following night, turned up, and had my new member talk, and I was the only new member joining that particular session. So again, listening to the new member talk, if it's not something that you've really put a lot of thought into about joining Slimming World and things like that, it can seem like a lot of information being given to you all at once, and it did feel a bit like that. So I knew straight away that the first thing I had to do was kind of go home and read my books, and that's what she had said, make sense of it yourself. But I can remember standing on the scales that night for my first weigh-in and being really quite shocked at just how high it actually was. I'd never really weighed myself or followed my weight, but I knew that it was bigger than what I thought it was going to be even at that point. It was the biggest I'd ever weighed before in my life. And stepping off the scales, the first thing that I kind of said is, what can I have for my dinner? What am I allowed to go away and have? So very, very quickly, she helped me work out something, and that was me. I was off to the local supermarket to get some shopping, and I wouldn't have called myself very kitchen confident at that point. Pretty much since moving to Scotland, all I'd really survived on was frozen chicken and things like that, and bread and lots of ketchup and sauces, and that was pretty much all I ate. That and anything that could be bought and eaten in a store, like cakes or biscuits or anything like that, and fizzy juice and lots of it as well. But I know that first night, while I'd sat through the group, one of the ladies had mentioned about making a chicken korma and using a coconut yogurt in it with curry powder. So while I was in getting what we decided on for my dinner that night, which was a packet of rice and sinning for that, and a packet of chicken and sinning for some chilli sauce, because I could microwave all of that, and that would get me off and running until I had the chance to go home and read my books and work out a plan. While I was in there, I also bought some curry powder. I also bought coconut yogurt as well. And I felt just confident enough to go home and give it a whirl, as it were. So one of the things throughout my adult life of living on my own was I always found that if I bought food, I never necessarily ate it before it went off. So I stocked up in the likes of frozen 5% mince and frozen corn, because I knew I liked that and I knew I could add stock cubes to it. So I'd also bought the frozen corn chicken as well, and that was my experiment that night. I had my dinner, and I also mixed some curry powder and coconut yogurt together and some corn chicken pieces, and I made a chicken korma, which I had with some of the rice as well. And I remember feeling really, really accomplished at that as well, because it was a big deal for me. But I went away and I stuck to the plan religiously. That first week I didn't really know what I was doing, but I worked out a couple of meals that I knew I liked having, like spaghetti bolognese and chili and things like that. I knew I could have a certain amount of Rivitas a day, and I knew I could have some hi-fi bars as well and count those as sins. So I just stuck to it, really just to see what happened in that first week. So I went back along to group the following week. I went to the group that was near me, so it was 6 days until my weigh-in, not 7. And again, not really knowing much about weight loss. I'd always watched programs the likes of The Biggest Loser and things like that. And I knew that first weigh-in, it's always a big, massive number. So I knew, because I'd stuck to this religiously, I was coming into at least half a stone off, or 8 pounds, or 9 pounds, or whatever it was. And I stood in the scales and it was 3.5 pounds. And I remember being really, really disappointed on that first week, even though it was a quarter of a stone, and that's a huge achievement for anyone. I was disappointed and I almost walked out. But again, thankfully, having that cousin as the consultant, and there were such a friendly group as well, that took my seat and sat in then for image therapy, and came up with 1 or 2 other hints and tips that particular week as well, where I was able to go off and use those. So the second week, when it came to weighing in, it was another 3.5 pounds off. And all of a sudden, this £3.5, I wasn't as disappointed as I was the first week, because all of a sudden that meant that I'd lost half a stone. And half a stone all of a sudden sounded so much more exciting than losing £3.5 in a week. So I got my first bit of bling on my book. I felt amazing at the awards ceremony. I felt all built up, like I'd achieved something wonderful. And for me, it really was. It was huge. Getting that recognition for doing right and sticking to the plan, because it was such a big deal for me to join in the first place, and such a big deal for me not just halfway through the week to give up. And that was it. I was hooked. So all my life I had maybe not actively tried to lose weight, but I'd always wanted to. And I'd always gone down the exercise route. I'd always thought that to lose weight you needed to exercise. And as many gyms as I joined, and as many times as I'd worked out a routine or bought a DVD to follow at home, I just came to the realisation that I don't like body magic. Quite frankly, it was never something that I'm going to be in love with. So it was huge for me that all of a sudden I'd lost weight. I'd lost half a stone in 2 weeks, and I'd done it through eating. And I hadn't had to give up my curries or my spag balls or all the dinners that I love to have. And I was still even able to ring a takeaway and have a beer at the weekend if I wanted. So food optimizing for me was like the biggest, most well-kept secret that no one had ever let me in on before in my life. And I could do it, just like everyone else. It wasn't that you needed to be special or you needed to know all this stuff about how to cook and how to make stuff. I could do it. And here I was on my way. So my journey went on pretty much like that. Every week my target was another 3.5 stone, or £3.5, should I say. £3.5 every single week. That became almost like my thing in group when I was setting my mini targets. And every week, bar 2 of them on my journey, I did achieve exactly that, £3.5. So it became a bit like a running joke within the group. And I can remember one of my most favourite memories of my journey was about maybe a month into it, when I'd lost about a stone. At that point, I had to go out and buy new clothes. Because quite frankly, my trousers were just falling down. And I wasn't particularly well off when I joined Slimming World. I mean, there were weeks when I really had to save up that fiver, or, kind of go without, in order to still have my fiver for a Wednesday to go to group. And I wasn't really in a position to be able to go out and get a brand new wardrobe. Plus, I knew that this was working and it wasn't stopping. And if I carried on the way I was going, I was going to shrink down even more and need more new clothes further down the line. So I went off to one of the local supermarkets, and I picked a lovely pair of jeans and a couple of t-shirts, and they were my in-between clothes. And buying in-between clothes was my favourite memory from my first journey with Slimming World, because I hadn't had new clothes in a long, long time. I'd gone with the stuff that fitted me, and they were nearly hanging off me. And this is the first time I'd gone out and chosen something that I really, really wanted. But I knew that they were cheap enough that they were probably going to go in the bin as well at some point. And so that was that. So 3 months later, from having joined on the 12th of July 2014, I picked up my Target Award. I had set it at a particular number, just under 14 stone. I just wanted to be under 14, that was my target. And in November, one of the weeks when I went along, I was half a pound away from it. And I can remember everyone that particular week saying, "Oh my God, we thought you were going to get target this week. Run away to the toilet quickly and see if that makes a change. We'll reweigh you, we'll do all of that." And I can remember not wanting to, and still just feeling so proud in group that it didn't matter that I hadn't got target that week, because I was going to get it next week anyway. But it was such an accomplishment to have come from where I'd started, where my journey began to where I was. So I picked up my target award the following week, and that was me. Loving life and just in shock. I had never in my life been what you would class as skinny. I didn't even recognise my own body. There were times as well along my journey where the physical side of slimming is one thing, but the psychological side's another. And I can remember one time in Tesco's pushing my trolley around and feeling my hip bone. It just brushing my hand against it and not knowing what it was. And when I realised what it was, feeling quite freaked out by it, because I didn't recognise the body that I was actually slimming into. And so there was all of that side as well to kind of take on board. But I literally felt like I had won the biggest competition in the world at that point. Through losing all the weight, I had realised that I didn't really like my job very much at that point. So feeling more confident, feeling slimmer, I was able to go off and get a job that I absolutely loved. I was earning far more money. I was happier. I was working outside of my flat, so I was getting to actually meet with people on a daily basis. And at that point, I was approached by my cousin, the consultant, and also the team developer to maybe consider becoming a consultant. And immediately I just went, no, that's not for me. That's not something that I want to do. Not at this point. I just feel like I've reached my target and I want to enjoy life, and I want to enjoy all of that without taking on additional pressure. And it took me a further year before I even decided to become a consultant. But one of the things that did happen to me on reaching target was that I thought that I didn't really need group very much anymore. So I'd become a social team member for my cousin as well, and that's what kept me coming every week, was that commitment that I knew she needed my help to help her run the 7:30 session. And after reaching target, I still came every week for about a month, and then Christmas happened. And then in the new year, I just found myself with my work and with all the extra confidence as well that I had. I was going out more and I was socialising more, that I began to maybe only go to group once every couple of weeks. And then at one point it was once a month. And I think the longest I went in that gap was 5 weeks without actually weighing in. And for the first time on my actual journey, I remember that weighing in after that 5 week gap or 3 week gap or whatever it was, I was nervous doing it because I actually didn't know what it was I was weighing in to see. Maybe I felt a wee bit heavier, but maybe I wouldn't show as being heavier. I didn't know. And that was when I began to realise that when you do miss group like that, or when you don't attend regularly, the control's gone. And that was my biggest thing with Slimming World, was not only, losing all this weight, but being in control of it. Knowing that if I go away and I do X, Y, and Z exactly as the book says, I am going to lose weight. And that was when I realised that, missing weeks in between, even as a target member, when you think you know everything, that's when the weight began to creep back on. And so for those first few months, I maintained my target weight for about a year, and then decided that, again, my work had changed a little bit and I wanted a new challenge. So I actually approached my consultant and my team developer and says, the way you asked me last year about becoming a consultant, I think I'm quite interested in maybe finding out a bit more about it. And I went along to what we call an opportunity day for that. So I went along, and the funny thing I always say is it was on a Saturday or Sunday, I can't quite remember, but I slept in for it, and I could remember opening my eyes and seeing the alarm clock, realising that I'd slept in and thinking, if I just roll over and go back to sleep, it's fine. And I thought, no, go along and see what it's all about. You want to. And I really did go with still an open mind. I didn't really know what it cost. I didn't really know what was involved. But I went along to the opportunity event, and at the opportunity event, it's all potential consultants who are all members of Slimming World groups all over the place coming along. but we did a wee introduction bit, and I was right at the head of the table. So they came around, and I'd maybe heard about 6 before and after stories from other people, other members who'd come along to find out more about it. And as soon as the district manager got to myself, I just said, literally from what I've just heard now, I came in with an open mind this morning, but after hearing these stories, I want to do this. And that was it. Listen to the opportunity event, listen to what was involved in it. And that was me. So I went off and done my interview, passed that, and then went off training and opened my very first group in East Kilbride on the 28th of December 2015. I had 1 member come through my door, and I'm delighted to say that member is still with me today. She calls herself my baby, and she is my baby for as long as she'll be with me. And the following week then was what we call our big night. The first kind of Monday, as my groups were then, my first Monday in the new year, the 4th of January, and I had about 35-40 members through my door. And that was it. Within a month I was up to a double session, and the following January then I opened my first morning group. So there's been a couple of wee changes in my group ever since then. We originally outgrew our first venue, and we had to move, and we merged the morning group and the evening group together on one day, and then very, very quickly realised that venue wasn't going to work out either, so we had to move again within 6 weeks. So we finally found our home now, and that's me now, 2.5 years a consultant. I'm not going to lie, I'm not at my target currently. So the first week I went for my very first interview to become a consultant, I left my target range, and it did take me 1.5 years to get back into it again. Various reasons for that. I think when I'd gotten to my target, I immediately fell back into old eating habits, and thinking that because I'd gotten all the way to my target that I could do that now. So my weight went back up as I became a consultant, and then obviously the work that's involved as well in becoming a consultant, it kind of takes over your life a wee bit, and you care more about your members' weight losses than you do, your own in that period. But I got back to target then last year. It almost happened by accident. It wasn't something I was consciously working towards, but I did get back to my target, and again I've left it since. So it's an interesting thing as a consultant, because you're still a member, and we still are following the plan, and as every member is, because keeping in mind, food optimising in Slimming World is not a faddy diet that you're going to follow for a wee while and then just go back to normal. This is, habits for life that you're going to be following, and what we're teaching you. So it's interesting that some members really love the fact that I'm still a member and go up and down like everyone else. But it just shows you that I'm human, and this is something that we're all in together and we're all working towards together. I can blame leaving my target the last time on getting into a relationship, which I'm sure everyone can relate to as well. The usual, wanting to just enjoy life a wee bit more, and the focus away from yourself onto your partner. And again, now this is me working towards getting back to target the 3rd time. The one thing I will say is that I'm excited about it this time, and I'm excited to go back to target, because those lessons for life that we teach you at Slimming World, I know that I've finally taken on board for me personally, and I know that this time when I get to target, I will absolutely stay at target, because now I 100% know what my trigger points are. I know all the things that I've done in the past that have basically almost put me back to square one again. But as I say, the great thing about Slimming World is once you know the secret, you can't unlearn it of food optimizing, and it's just finding that motivation and that perseverance to carry on, and remember that you're doing it for you and no one else. So that brings me kind of up to date on where I am. So like I say, I want to put these videos together because there's loads of questions that we get asked in Slimming World that we don't always necessarily get to put out to our members. We don't always necessarily get to say from our own point of view. And certainly all that help, that support, that motivation that I give my members, that hopefully I give my members in group every single week, it does come from a place of totally understanding exactly where a person's journey begins. Getting all the way to target, things not going according to plan and maybe leaving target, and just persevering on. And that's what every consultant at Slimming World aims to do. We've all come from that place. We've all sat in a new member talk before. So if there is any members that are absolutely, worried about joining Slimming World, or they're wondering if it's for them, or even any guys, because gentlemen don't. I do have quite a lot of gentlemen that come to my group as a male consultant, but there are plenty more gentlemen out there that maybe have thought about it in the past and not quite known what's involved. So I promise you that if I can do it, absolutely anyone can do it, and you will get all of that help, that support, that motivation, all that cheering you on when you're doing brilliantly at this, and understanding that sometimes weeks don't go according to plan and you need that wee bit of help just to refocus and get back on it. All of that is found in any Slimming World group that you'll walk into. So next video I'll speak to you more about another subject, but for now I'm going to sign off and say thanks very much for watching.